Okay, thank you all. Monica, bon courage, as we say.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. I have a very short note for you today. As you know, we have a meeting still going on at the General Assembly, and the President is chairing a plenary meeting on the advance of women, item 29, and on item 88 about the request for an advisory opinion on the International Court of Justice on the legal consequences of the separation of the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius in 1965. The draft resolution was introduced by Senegal on behalf of the African group. As of this morning, 15 speakers have been inscribed to take the GA podium on this issue. Mauritius was represented by His Excellency Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth. The British ambassador, Her Excellency Karen Pierce, spoke on behalf of the country. Prior to this debate, the General Assembly adopted by consensus a resolution to hold a high-level meeting in 2020 to mark the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The draft resolution had over 100 sponsors. The PGA commended Kenya for its leadership on this resolution, as well as many co-sponsors from all regions. Mr. Espinosa said that almost 25 years on, the Beijing Platform for Action remains highly relevant because progress has been painfully slow. As we heard at the Commission on the Status of Women this year, if we maintain the current rate of progress, it will take 108 years, more than a century, to close the global gender gap, and 202 years to achieve economic gender parity, and no country has achieved gender equality, end of quote. The President of the General Assembly hopes that the high-level meeting will be an opportunity to renew the commitment to empower women and girls everywhere. Mrs. Espinosa will shortly appoint two co-facilitators to help with consultations on modalities on the event in 2020. And on the PGA agenda this afternoon, she will meet the ambassador of Italy to the United Nations, Her Excellency Mariangela Tapia. She will also hold bilateral meetings with the ambassadors of Singapore and Iceland on the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, to be marked also next year. The PGA will also receive at her office the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain, Ms. Ana de Palacio. She will finish the day with a meeting with the permanent representatives of Bangladesh and Spain. And this is actually all from us. Okay, do you have any questions? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Monica, I have just one general question. You are a woman in power, and you represent a woman in power. Do you think, in terms of women empowerment and gender equality, we are there yet? And if not, what kind of road we have to travel? What needs to be done to improve the situation? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I represent a woman in power. She's the President of the General Assembly. Actually, the first woman from Latin America and the Caribbean to occupy this position, and the fourth president in 73 years of history of the United Nations. I think the numbers the numbers speak for themselves. Yes, we have a long way to go, but I think what the president has been stressing is that this is a constant, a work in progress, and a constant process. So we cannot, of course, we celebrate the victories and the steps that we have made so far, but it's a matter of continuing. And not only because it's very easy nowadays to speak about women empowerment, but more importantly than speaking about is actually practicing it. And it's not a job or a work for only women. It's actually women and men. We are talking here about parity, and parity means 50-50, yeah? So I think this is a priority for the president, and she has been very consistent in her work. We have numbers that she gave here before when she organized that pioneering, I would say, event bringing heads of states and government to the United Nations to talk about their own experience. It's not an easy path, but it's a path that we have to tread and work on every day. No, thank you. Thank you. I thank you. Yeah, I have Abdul Hamid and then Carla. I think your question has brought some light to the briefing room. Hamid, go ahead.
Thank you. I might be out of the loop, so just
yeah.
Excuse me if you spoke about that before.
No.
What's going on with the elections of the candidates for the 74th GA?
Yes.
When the debate among the candidates will start? Thank you.
No, absolutely. Actually, the debate, the interactive informal meeting with member states, where member states had the opportunity to ask questions to the candidate, who is actually the permanent representative of Nigeria, Ambassador Bande, His Excellency Ambassador Bande, happened already last week. And the election is scheduled for the 7th of June. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, Carla and then Joe. Carla, go ahead. Mr.
Thank you.
Got you.
In the President of the General Assembly speech on inequality, I believe, it was an excellent speech, but I believe she made some reference to structural changes that need to occur. And this is a follow-up on Anna's question. In a system of patriarchy, no matter how much effort is made for gender equity, it's impossible for women to be equal and empowered because patriarchy rests upon the subjugation of women. It's always been, I've read every book written on women's oppression and so forth, from Susan Brown Muddle to Germaine Greer, and it's always bothered me that the greatest work on women's rights and women's oppression was written by a man, and that was Engels on the origin of the family, private property, and the state. So as long as the structure of oppression exists and is not changed, what possibility is there for women ever to be actually empowered? The PGA is extraordinary because she was both minister of foreign minister and defense minister. And I understand she was appointed under President Correa, if I'm correct. And she's a very, very unusual woman in that sense. But what hope is there as long as we have a system of patriarchy? And this is something that's been raised by Abigail Disney, who's a bit unusual in this sense. And there can be meetings and meetings and meetings and marches and marches and marches. But if the structure rests upon women's being suppressed, what can be done without changing the structure?
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying actually reinforces what the PJ has been talking about, the gap probably between the speech and the reality, the practices. So if the patriarchy system, as you say, is reinforced, women will feel more and more or less and less empowered. And it's a matter of continuing your course and what it needs to be done in order to achieve gender parity without being discouraged by some of the aspects that you just mentioned. It's a work in progress, Carla. So when I think if you look back in history, we wouldn't have a record of achievements if we would despair and think that the game is over. So the game continues, and we have to work diligently in order to promote and to encourage other women as well to work for their own empowerment and not sit down and wait for that empowerment to come from other parts. But I will get back to you. Just let me go back to Joe, and then I have Dr. Abati. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, a specific question and then a more general question. The specific question is, as part of her campaign for more gender equality, parity, and so forth, what is the PGA's position on the worldwide debate over reproductive rights? abortion specifically. And the more general question is, now that she's in the last months of her term as PGA, she laid out, I think, as I recall, 7 broad goals. Where does she think she's made some specific progress, and where, in addition to the one you mentioned, gender equality, is she discouraged that she hasn't really made much progress at all?
No, on the contrary, I think progress has been made, and of course we are, as you said very well, into 7 months into this presidency. There's still some work to be accomplished, and it's a matter of cooperation. The PGA is not working here on her own. She actually is very grateful for the support that she receives from member states, which signed for the agenda, we endorsed the agenda, and are working with her hand in hand to make it happen. We, in this presidency, the PGA, Mrs. Espinosa, is very consistent in keeping records, so everything is actually documented, not only the meetings that are going on, but also the initiatives. We spoke about Women in Power here in March. That was a meeting where we had a concrete plan of action with 8 points, which are now being implemented by member states, but not only. So there will be a moment for, if you want, the balance of her mandate. We're not there yet, but her attention and her focus on the 7 priorities remains, and she is working, every day in order to make this happen. Yes. I will get back to you, Joe. Dr. Abadi.
Well, I had that specific question,
Sure.
which was about her position on the whole debate about reproductive rights and right to abortion, right of choice specifically. Does she see that as part of the larger issue that she's been raising about gender equality?
The PGA has been very outspoken in regard of women's empowerment and reproductive rights, and the rights that women and girls have to sexuality education, to have their information that they need to have in order to make their choices, and that's her position. Dr. Abadi, go ahead.
Thank you, Monica. As you mentioned, there has been some advancement and progress in empowering of women and advancing women. At the same time, as you said, the president recognized that the progress in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration is painfully slow, as you put it. What does she attribute that to?
Well, there is not a single answer for your question, Dr. Abadi. We have how can I say, a group of factors, perhaps a series of factors which play a role. As we said before, the numbers are very clear. For instance, gender-based violence remains a global epidemic. We know that about 30% of women either suffered or will suffer violence, gender-based violence. And as we also know, most of these cases come from people very close to them, in their families, for instance, or in their very close a group of friends. We have, for instance, nowadays almost 700 million women and girls who were married before their 18th birthday, and we also know all the consequences that this brings to these girls on their education, on their economic independence, on their individual progress. And also, we also have other numbers that I can give to you afterwards if you want. But women continue to be paid approximately 20% less than men to do the same job. So according to the World Bank, countries are losing 160 trillion annually in health due to these differences in the salaries of women and men. So all these numbers and all these cases, they don't go down to one single factor. The factors are different, the cultural realities, the regions are different, but the decision or the decision actually which has to be made to empower women and to change these numbers and this situation, it's also a political decision. And the PJ recognizes that very clearly. She has asked for these political decisions to be made, which are based on political will, by the way, in order to advance women and girls worldwide. Yes. Okay, I have Carla, and then I'll go back to you. Carla, go ahead.
I have a rather long question. Historically, women only obtained the right to vote, I believe it was at the beginning of the 20th century, by very violent acts very often. They would tie themselves to railroad tracks, they would disrupt parliament, make it impossible for the male leaders to speak, and destroy property. And it was only by the visible disruption of society that they finally, I suppose it was considered practical to give them a few crumbs, and they were granted the right to vote. Also, getting back to inequality, the unbelievable poverty around that time of the workers and the repression by the moneyed classes was so crushing that there were no labor movements until the movement of anarchists was a great threat to the classes in power, and it was that example that gave some courage to the workers who then began unionizing. So it looks as though changes in systems are not possible without very drastic actions. So this is a kind of, what's the word? It almost seems contradictory, but it, the same things to say the same, they're going to have to change. We're seeing now an increase in inequality, but many violent suicide actions against the very privileged, which are actually similar to what the anarchists did at the beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 19th. What does it take for change to occur?
Yeah, changes, they happen in different times and in different moments of history. We now have our moments, and our moment seems to be very based on engagement of individuals, society engagement, people's engagement, citizens' engagement. And I think we have been seeing, important examples where the word has been going a long way. Word has power, as we say, and the participation of women and girls, but not only women and girls, also men and the young men are fundamental, are crucial to change this situation. Okay, I give you the last words, and then I think you have a guest coming, correct? Yeah, go ahead. Yes. The meeting at the General Assembly is still going on. I can see and I can tell you from here. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi Monica.
Hi.
So you just spoke about the statistics about child marriage, you know. Is there any initiative the PGA is taking to, against child marriage in developing countries like Yemen or Bangladesh, Pakistan?
Yeah. No, the PJ is actually in close contact with UN Women, as we know, and she has been supporting the initiatives that UN Women have been taking in this regard. But not only when she visits countries, she engages with women and girls in order to listen to their requests and to their stories wherever she goes. Yes, it's a very serious matter. It's not an easy matter, and we should tackle it. Okay, anything else? If not, I would say I see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for today. Thanks.